Hey, if you want access to the transcripts, the show notes, and the links talked about as part of this episode, you can go to seven, so the word all spelled out, SEVEN health.com/309. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel. I'm a nutritionist and a coach and an eating disorder expert, and I help people to fully recover. So before we get started with today's episode, I just want to say that I'm currently taking on clients. And as I said a moment ago, I truly believe in full recovery. And this is the case whether you've been living with an eating disorder for a very brief amount of time, or this is something that has been going on for many decades. So if you are living with an eating disorder and you're sick and tired of living with an eating disorder and recognizing how compromised your life has become and how small it's become, and that you want to do something different, I would love to help you reach that place of full recovery. You can send an email to info@7-health.com. And as part of the subject line, just put in coaching, and then I can get the details over of how we can work together. So on today's show, we have a guest interview, and my guest today is Jamie Magdic. So Jamie is a registered dietitian nutritionist and the founder of Side by Side Nutrition, a group of fiercely passionate, health at every size, weight inclusive registered dietitians. Jamie is passionate about providing accessible, expert quality care to help people fully recover from disordered eating and to learn to body trust and acceptance. So I've known Jamie for quite a while. This is something we touch on at the beginning of the show. And when wanting to get Jamie to come on the show, we were thinking about different ideas of what we could cover. And Jamie has a book, and the book is called Food and Body Image Freedom Workbook and Journal: Find Body Love and Food Freedom Without Diets, Food Obsession, and Weight Shame. And as the title would suggest, this is all about body image work and helping someone to do that work and all of the different processes to go through as part of that. So that is really what we cover as part of the show. It is all about the different aspects of body image. So as part of this episode, we talk about Jamie's relationship with food growing up and her body growing up, and how she developed and overcame her own disordered relationship with food and body. And I think a lot of this was then the impetus for the book and her then becoming a dietitian, as she talks about. In terms of the body image stuff, we talk about brain science and body image. We talk about body tolerance. We talk about inner positivity, body checking, body attunement, exercise and body image, and really so much more. There is a lot that we cover. This is a very wide-ranging conversation, really touching on so many different aspects of body image. So that is it with this intro. Let me get on with the show. Here is my conversation with Jamie Magdic. Hey, Jamie, thanks for joining me on the show today. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we were talking before we hit record that it was probably back in early 2019 that we first chatted, and I've been following what you've been doing since then. So it's really nice to actually have you on the show, because I think in 2019 I came and did an Instagram live for you, or did something with you.
Yeah, we did a little video back in 2019. Yeah, it's good to connect, and a lot has happened since then. So this is exciting to reconnect.
Yeah, definitely. So look, I think for today, we're going to spend most of our time talking about body image. I know this is a topic that comes up a lot from my clients. I know I'm assuming the same for your clients. It's something that is very front of mind and comes up a lot with eating disorder recovery. So that's really where I want to spend a lot of our time today. But I guess just as a starting place, let's talk about you. And so give listeners a little bit of background on yourself, like who you are, what training you've done, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jamie Magdic, she, her pronouns, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. Prior to becoming a registered dietitian, I was a teacher for about 4 years. And yeah, right away, I knew that I wanted to do something that was still helping people connect with people, but that felt a little bit more aligned with my passions.
Yeah.
And so I went back to school almost immediately and became a registered dietitian. What my career has looked like as far as being a registered dietitian has been exclusively in disordered eating, eating disorders, body image at an outpatient level. So I came right out of school and started that and started taking clients and began, supervision and mentorship and all the learning.
Yeah.
I started where I wanted to do, working with disordered eating, intuitive eating, and quickly found that, on the spectrum, you are going to see eating disorders.
Yeah.
It's really funny because ultimately, when I was going to school, I thought eating disorders is the one thing I don't want to see. And that's the thought that I had. I didn't explore it. I think it was kind of unconscious. And because it's something that I didn't look at in myself with what struggling in the past, because in the past I did struggle with an eating disorder for quite some time, probably, on and off for 7 years without any help. And then it became more of disordered eating. And so, yeah, it's really wild how the stars aligned. When I went back to school, started doing my education outside of school as well, and found the intuitive eating space, the health at every size space, the fat positive space. I started also diving deeper into my relationship with food. And then I really just I fell in love with working with more complex eating disorders. And so I kind of shied away from doing more of the intuitive eating and disordered eating and really wanted to work with those complex eating disorders, and ate up all the education and mentorship and worked with, a lot of wonderful supervisors. So yeah, that's kind of how I just really, the stars aligned, I fell into it. And
Yeah.
then the stars aligned again with forming a group practice. It was just me, solo private practice. And there was a need for folks who provided accessible care for in specialized care and eating disorders that were also what I felt, practicing from a safe, ethical place. And so because I couldn't refer to people back then in 2020, because there weren't many of us who took insurance and who followed the similar philosophies and worked with eating disorders, I decided to hire my first provider and then wanted to take really good care of her. And so it continued to grow into what it is now at Side by Side, which is 12 plus and growing dietitians at our practice. And we're able to serve 200 clients a week and growing. So it's been fabulous and such a journey. So yeah, that's what my career has looked like so far. And I kind of branched off. I'm doing some other stuff as well now. But yeah, does that answer your question? I'll give you a little bit of background.
Yeah, it does. It definitely gives us some background. And so I'd love to find out more about
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
before you were a dietitian. So
Oh yeah.
you mentioned obviously that there was these eating disorder and disordered eating.
Mhm.
So if we go back earlier than that, what was food like growing up? What was food like in
Yeah.
your household?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't reflect on this too much. It's interesting sometimes when I'm asked these questions on the spot. It's the first time I'm processing and thinking through it. But yeah, growing up, I definitely, there was a lot of diet culture in the house. Definitely good food, bad food mentality, also good bodies, bad bodies, acceptable bodies, unacceptable bodies, comments like that from, grandparents and parents. I don't know, and also at school, even in junior high, people were already, bullying each other and making comments. And so it was definitely something that I internalized without really, I don't know, again, being very conscious of it, as I think many people aren't.
Yeah.
But it's something I started to internalize and follow rules and overexercise from, probably sixth, seventh grade. I remember seventh grade making sure I got in a certain amount of exercise every day, kind of from a punishing place, and started really restricting food and not really understanding it. But I remember it feeling very, very defeating from that point. And yeah, so growing up, food it definitely was still enjoyable. We enjoyed all different types of foods. There was really no foods off limits at my house, and I was never told that's something I needed to do. There are some comments made about my body for sure from different people, but I also, was very much a perfectionist, really, I don't know, caretaker, wanting to be in control. And I think that's part of my personality that picked up on, this is something that is I should also look at and perfect and control as well. So it was a combination. There's a lot of good things about food and enjoying food. And then there were also a lot of comments that for sure that I picked up.
And when it started to change, and you said the exercise started to increase,
Mhm.
or you started to restrict your
Yeah.
food, was there some pivotal event before that? Is there something where you, I don't know, you went to Weight Watchers with someone, or something happened that
Yeah.
sent you
Yeah.
down that road?
It's so hard to pinpoint what exactly started it and how heavily I got into it because it was such a long time ago and I was not very aware of it. My parents weren't very aware of it. I never got any help or support around it. It was never noticed. And so, although it did impact me so greatly, but I think that what I did notice when I reflected back on my journey has been there have been pivotal moments of different traumas in my life that where it really spiked and it really got a lot worse. And then when those things felt a little bit better, or before the next event happened that was pretty traumatic, I would have a period of feeling a little bit more at ease with food and body image, and then something would happen and so I, of course, reflecting back on it, it was absolutely a form of coping with my emotions and big emotions and me feeling sensitive and very sensitive to other people's emotions and
Yeah.
struggles where it really took hold, I would say. So those pivotal moments, but I don't know really when I started to fall into and why I started to fall into those behaviors.
Okay. And then in
Yeah.
terms of finding your way out of that stuff,
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
sounded when you were talking earlier that it was through starting as a dietitian that you started to become more aware of these
Yeah.
things. If
Hmm.
I pulled you aside when you were 15 or 16 or 17 and you
Yeah.
were honest, would you have thought there was something going on? Would you
Mhm.
have ever said, I think I have an eating disorder, or
Um,
I think I'm doing things with food that
yeah.
feel unhelpful?
Well, I do remember like 15, 16, 17. There were some moments I confided in a few different people. I remember telling a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, a cousin of mine, and my sister at different points, probably from 14 to 18, that I was like kind of expressing like this isn't normal, like something's going on.
Yeah.
And that was the extent of it. And so as far as me consciously and being aware and being afraid saying something, but I think at that time too, there's a lot of confusion around, what is health and well-being and, the necessary managing food in your body that you are told you need to do. And that you hear or that my parents were doing. And so it was a confusing thing. I definitely also, though, like if someone were to ask me, a trusted person were to ask me, I probably would have said, this doesn't feel normal, but I don't know how to stop doing this, or maybe I don't want to stop doing this. And so I think you had a two-parter question. Oh, when I started being conscious of that and, helping myself out of it or understanding it was something I
Yeah.
wanted to help myself out of. Yeah. I would say that I had like what would be all important, but what was a diagnosable eating disorder for probably 13, 14 up until maybe 22 years of age. And once I hit 22, I think that other like things started to settle as far as like different events in my life that were traumatic. I feel like I maybe I didn't need to cope with really big emotions anymore. And so I still had disordered eating and tendencies and a lot of body image issues. And, I was kind of got into a place of, and my eating disorder definitely morphed into different types, but I got into a place of, maybe chronic dieting or trying to find the version of healthy eating that was like the most superior or whatever, that stage.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like I was in that place for a while, feeling a lot better. And that also probably didn't prompt me to move forward to really work through it at that time because it felt more normal and less unsettling. But still, again, causing me a lot of distress. And I happened upon So it was before I became a dietitian when I understood this, but I was going to school to be a dietitian, which was a process over 3 or 4 years. It was my second bachelor's.
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of work outside of my schoolwork, and I came across a few different podcasts. Probably Christy Harrison's podcast was one of them, a couple other just intuitive eating podcasts, and it just made a lot of sense to me. And I think your podcast as well was one of them that I started listening to.
Okay.
And so just a few that really stood out and started changing my way of thinking and started it had me dive a little bit deeper into my relationship with food and body and just myself and coping and emotions and, therapy. Oh, and also when I was thinking about working with clients, really going to school and hearing things from others about, how they would practice with their clients and knowing I wanted to right off the bat, be in private practice. When I would hear other students or dietitians in the field speaking about food and body, it really also prompted me to think about how I would be safely practicing with clients or what I believe and what my philosophies are. And I just couldn't get down with and agree with these disordered eating like that and this healthism and this like superiority. And so I think that also kind of discouraged me. And this is a second degree. So it started to scare me a little because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm almost done with the second degree. And I don't know if I really want to be, telling people how to eat
Yeah.
or telling them I know more about food in their body than they do. And so very fortunately, I found these other philosophies that really I aligned with greatly and wanted to share and help others with. So yes, that would be the other thing that forced me to look at my relationship with food and body is thinking about how I wanted to help others when I became a dietitian.
Nice. And I mean, that's so lovely to hear because I think for so many people who do have a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder, going into dietetics can be a real recipe for disaster because
Oh
it
yeah.
it
Mhm.
legitimizes so many of the disordered behaviors and patterns of thinking and all of that. And so
Yeah.
for you to have it be a lot more jarring and be the reflection being, hey, I don't want to do this as opposed
Mhm.
to it legitimizing what you were doing before. I think that's a really useful and helpful and lovely recognition that you had.
Thanks. Yeah. And thank goodness for too for me in practicing in a safe way. Because you do see a lot of people with really good intentions, but just, are not aware or they're not aware of this disordered patterns or see how that might be a problem or are able to have something that forces them to look at it and then they are practicing that and spreading that disordered eating mentality and that idea that you can't trust food, you can't trust your body, there's a superior way of eating, I know best, kind of philosophy that I was seeing providers practice with. So I feel fortunate.
Nice. Nice. Is
Mhm.
there anything else you want to add in terms of things when you reflect that really helped you move forward in terms of your own recovery?
I would say, in addition to learning more about my relationship with food, I really learned more about my relationship with my body. And that is something that is just so complex and large. So when I think about what I worked on, when I think about working with body image, it really had a lot to do with my relationship with myself. A lot of self-compassion work and understanding what that is and how I treat myself in a lot of different aspects of my relationship with myself. I would say that was probably a huge catalyst in my relationship with food and why I'm so passionate about talking about body image right away and really looking to understand what that is for yourself. I feel is a very important part of people's nutrition journey, how that impacts. So, yeah, I would say just the idea of self-compassion really hit me hard. I also became a mom at that point, a stepmom to a 6-year-old. And I think that just some new life events as well prompted me to want to reflect and grow and look at things a little bit outside of myself as well, and how I wanted to teach her about food and body image. So those are, yeah, again, processing kind of with you in real time.
Yeah.
I would say those were the big catalysts for
Okay.
me. Yeah.
Nice. And look, we're going to definitely get into more
Yeah.
of this as we go through chatting about body image. But I think the thing off the bat with hearing this in terms of self-compassion or being a role model for someone else, I think often when people think of body image work, it's like I need to take selfies or I need to be
Mhm.
loving
Mhm.
these certain parts of my body and
Right.
overcome some of my struggles around that stuff. And it's not
Mhm.
that that can't be a part of body
Yeah.
image work, but actually I think body image work is actually a lot deeper than that,
Oh.
and is a lot more to do with self concept, is a lot more to do with that, how you spend your time, is a lot more like as you talked about there in terms of looking after this young human and how you wanted to be a role model for them probably connects to the values of like, okay, what do I truly value in life? And that kind of work. So I want this conversation, as we're going to demonstrate, that body image work is a lot broader than most people think about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In a really great way. I think that it's really hard to put body image and body image work into this neat box because it is so complex and it does really encompass so many different pieces of people's lives. And so I think that's what drew me to it, not only seeing that for myself, but seeing that with clients and how each individual and the complexity of their body image journey and what makes up body image and all you can do around that and how it propels people forward really excited me. And I really like a good challenge. I know that's about me, but I really like a good challenge. And so it was like being not having a lot of body image resources out there, with it being a very difficult conversation for to have with folks in session. It was something that I really like set I had a huge passion for and still have a huge passion for understanding what that is and how we can have that conversation its entirety to with that individual to really get them to that really solid place with understanding their relationship with their body and having a intuitive, compassionate relationship with their body.
I know you've written a workbook all around body image, and I'm gonna pull through or pull some of the concepts as part of
Yeah,
that out, and we can then have a
wonderful.
conversation
Yeah.
about it. I know you just started with this is a huge, broad topic that includes lots of different things. And my first question is, how do you define body image? So, like,
Oh
how do
yeah,
you put it into a little box? But if
I
we were
know.
to define it, and if there is a definition that you use in the book, what do you use?
Yeah, so that is funny because I love having this conversation, and sometimes it's so difficult for me to have this conversation because it is so complex. I'm like, how do you even begin talking about this? I love working one-on-one because then I could, right away I can have them guide me to what we need to start working on. But if I would say how you would define body image, I'm like pulling it apart and I can pull that open and describe it. But just if I were to say for myself, when I think about body image, I would say just your relationship to your body. I really view it as I think it's super helpful to view it as a relationship, like the
Yeah,
relationship between you and your body. And that encompasses so much how you relate to the world, your individuals, yourself, how you see your body, how you feel about your body, how you take care of your body. And when we start to pick those apart, there's so much within that as well when it comes to self-image, self-worth, self-confidence, the different parts of you, if we're talking IFS, how you
yeah,
take care of yourself and how you speak to yourself, how you feed yourself, how you view weight and size and bodies and health. And so as you can see, I'm already starting to describe body image and it's very hard for me. I would just say your relationship with your body, and that is so different for every individual as well. So hopefully that answer made sense. I
it did.
actually hate
It
that
did.
question.
And look, I feel the same in that there isn't a nice, concise answer unless you completely strip it down to it's the relationship you have with your body. And as
Mhm.
part of that relationship, there are all these other component parts that you talked about. It can
Right.
be the aesthetics. but it can
Yeah.
also be the sensations and the feelings. It can be how you
Yeah.
talk to yourself. It can
Hmm.
be your history in terms
Yeah.
of experiences that have happened. It can be the meaning that you attach to all those different experiences. It can be how
Hmm.
you move and use your body. So I'm totally in agreement with you in that, yeah, there are lots of different parts connected to
Yeah.
this. And that means that when we're thinking about doing body image work, it's
Hmm.
doing all of these different areas or exploring all these different areas. And for some people, some of these we don't really need to touch. Like
Right.
it's
Hmm.
this isn't a real pain point for someone, or this is actually something that
Yeah.
feels pretty straightforward, and so this isn't where we need to put a ton of attention. But there's these other areas where, okay, it does feel like self-compassion is a really big thing that is missing, and so we need to put some focus there.
Yes, you said that so beautifully. I very much agree with that. I think it's just very hard to describe in a definition what your relationship with your body looks like because it's very similar to saying, what is a romantic relationship? What is a parenting relationship? There's so much that comes into play when describing that. And so I think that it's so individualized and it's so complex, but I also think that that's very important to as a provider and with working with folks to have a concrete framework, all of the different things like to explore so we don't have any stone left unturned, so there's no missing part, so there's a lot of guidance in how to explore it in a safe way, in a way that rushing too much ahead where we have education. And so I do believe also in a concrete framework, and that's where this program and journal come in with all the work that I've done with clients. But as you mentioned, for some folks sit for a long time in one section of body image work, really needing to explore that and get uncomfortable with that. And some people need to keep coming back to the same part of body image work, and then some people skip over certain parts and don't need certain parts. And I find that's very similar with food. And when you start
Yep.
working on your relationship with food, you might think, wow, I have all these fear foods, and you start experimenting and working with some rules, and then you jump over and you don't need to work on the other things that you naturally understand them. Or some people really, really need to focus on each aspect for quite some time. So it's really different for every individual.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things that you talk about in the book is connected to brain science and body image. So
Mhm.
what is it that you're talking about there and sharing there?
I think that's part of the introduction or the toolkit. I have like the course toolkit where what to use and what to remember and what to come back to when you are working through body image and food. And so when I think of neuroplasticity, people's habits, beliefs, behaviors, really, so people have these ideas and thoughts that are so ingrained, which
Yeah.
is just the definition of neuroplasticity, which is that your brain can change, you can create new neural pathways to create new beliefs and new behaviors. And I think that's what makes body image work so incredibly hard as well. One of the things is that people have these really reinforced thoughts that they reinforce with behaviors that are then also reinforced by the rest of the world and diet culture that tell them certain things about what body image work is and what they should be doing to quote unquote take care of their body, if they can trust food, if they can trust their body. And they have these really strong thoughts that become beliefs that impact them. And I think it's really hard for people to look at because they are sitting with these old pathways, needing to go against them and create new ones,
Yeah.
which is huge because that feels like a very comfortable place, even though it might be causing us a lot of distress. So it takes a lot of patience, time, bravery, courage, and support to start rebuilding those pathways because rebuilding that means challenging your belief systems, really going against some thoughts that really feel like they are protecting you, and trying really like scary behaviors that you have convinced yourself are not right and the wrong thing to do. So it's a lot of it takes someone being really ready and to do that work. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the things when I was thinking about what you said there in terms of the way that we have ingrained belief around body image, for a lot of people, the message that they received is, I will have better body image if I am in a thinner body, or I
Yes.
have a body that matches more up to the
Mhm.
society standards or beauty or whatever it may be. And so
Mhm.
that means that the only way they've tried to have that improve is by dieting, is by
Mhm.
exercise, is by
Mhm.
restriction, etc.
Right.
And so
Right.
when you're trying to say, well, like, actually, body image is a lot broader than that. And
Mhm.
actually, by keeping up this focus and fixation with, I need to reduce my size or I need to have this be a particular way for me to feel confident, it really keeps you stuck in that
Oh, yeah.
narrow band and actually
Mhm.
is perpetuating the
Oh,
uncomfortableness that you're feeling around that. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it's then how getting someone to really understand that and starting to
Mhm.
explore other alternatives, because it can feel like what you're telling me doesn't make sense. Like this is the one and only thing that is ever going to make an improvement in terms of my feeling of how I feel in my body. And
Right.
so, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's such a that that's super frustrating to me because I think it does keep people stuck for so long. And it's really hard for people to come across an opportunity to maybe look at what they're doing and look at what they're being sold and told by diet culture and what body image work is, because that is what most people are going to see when it comes to, hey, how can we feel better about our body? Manipulating your body, manipulating food, dieting, changing your body, losing weight, whatever way, they want to change their body to feel better about body image. And that's just going to bring you deeper and deeper into a tougher, more anxiety provoking, less intuitive relationship with food and body. But it's what people see everywhere. And so going against that, I think, is very difficult. And I think there's a big, using shame in that regards and using this idea that you cannot trust your body, you cannot trust food. Of course, people are going to not want to give up the idea that dieting is thing that is going to ultimately save you and get you to a place where you can feel comfortable around food and you can trust your body and you can feel comfortable in your body. Because, yeah, there's just this, it's hard to walk away from that. So that's one of the first things I start to do with clients. And actually, it's a huge part of the beginning of the workbook and program is knowing these, and even before people start to come into it, to really starting to challenge these things and seeing that that's a possibility for them right now, to start to be ready to open up their mind to these new concepts that could be pretty new and scary to folks. So
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And I think the part that can also be tricky is that often there was this honeymoon period where that did
Mm-hmm.
work, whether that was I was losing weight, it felt really easy, I felt really good, I got lots of praise.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this window where it felt really easy,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be 10 years, 20 years since then, and yet we still come back to
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Or there can be situations where just because I've been told something for so long, it seems illogical that something else can be true. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of having conversations I've had with people where they can recognize that when I was in a smaller body, I was more isolated. I had more
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. I was less confident. I wasn't seeing people in the way that I was. I wasn't able to go to parties in the way that I am now. I didn't have the freedom that now. And yet there is still the feeling that I don't want to put on any more weight than
Mm-hmm.
this. Like life is going to get worse if I put on more weight than this. When every increase since they were at that lower place has led to a better quality of life, there is still this fear and this uncertainty and this cognitive dissonance around the fact that like this just doesn't make sense to me. It can't
Oh,
be that way.
oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. People can have a lot of evidence and experience, which I really try and have people look at because they have to come to it themselves, which is, if it would have worked, if this way is the ultimate way that would have worked for you, losing that weight or being a certain size or being, or this diet, if it would have worked, then we wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't still be struggling. We wouldn't be more anxious. We wouldn't be trying our next diet. And I think another really, really tough part of it is that even though, what is it, 96%, 98% of diets fail,
Yeah.
even and they see that experience, they also very much hear and are marketed to this idea, we want to be accepted in our world. We want to be loved. We want it. So when we're hearing messages that tell us to be loved, to be accepted, to get whatever you're desiring in life, like this is an important piece of it. It's really hard to let go of that idea because I think that people feel like when they're letting go of diets, from the conversations that I've had with clients, and for me, they're also letting go of the opportunity to feel comfortable in their body, to be able to have maybe a relationship with someone that they are interested in, or go after certain goals, or have certain lifestyle. I think they feel like they're giving that up too, which is very scary. So I think that ultimately, there's something you said there that stuck out. Oh, that cognitive dissonance, when people are feeling like they're logically able to understand that that wasn't a better place to be. I think that it's so important. So I'll probably use this a lot today, but when it comes to trust, like when we
Yep.
speak of trust to ourselves, like trust we have with ourselves, it's so important to really have a solid, full trust with ourselves and keep growing that and diving into understanding that. And I think that is the same when it comes to our relationship with food and body, because I think when you're able to build that and have that trust with yourself, trust with what you want, trust with what feels good with your relationship with food and body, I think that it's really hard to turn that corner and go after you've turned that corner and you have that trust. I think it's hard to turn back and start sliding backwards because you've experienced it, So anyways, I'm getting into the weeds.
No,
Sometimes I think when I talk, I'm really like
I,
high level, like instead of breaking down the little things. So hopefully that makes sense.
no, it does. And we definitely, I want to talk about the body trust piece because I think it is really important. I guess one of the other things that came to mind when hearing you speak there, I think a lot of the time for many people, it can be the trigger of being around other people. And that
Mm-hmm,
can be
mm-hmm.
other people in real life. It can be other
Yeah.
people on Instagram or social
Mm-hmm,
media.
mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've noticed from having conversations with people is their mind instantly goes to these stories about what is happening
Mm-hmm,
in someone's life. So someone
mm-hmm.
who has the quote unquote better body, there's all of this story that is attached
Mm-hmm.
to
Oh yeah.
that about what relationships they're having, what sex they're having, what amount of money they're making, what fantastic time they're having in their life, etc. And
Uh-huh.
what I've noticed, and this is something I will say to clients regularly, because I have been doing this work for so long, when I am seeing
Mm-hmm.
someone whose body matches up to society's standards, I'm not instantly going to, wow, they must have the most amazing life. My
Oh yeah.
my thought pattern is, I wonder what is really going on with that person. Like, I wonder
Mm-hmm.
how happy they truly are. I wonder what they're having to do to keep that up. Is that where their body naturally, truly wants to be? Or are they having to do a lot of things to have that occur? And
Mm-hmm.
so just recognizing what is the story that I'm creating connects to this person that I'm imagining or this person that has triggered something for me. Because yeah,
Right.
we are meaning making machines and we're always creating some kind of meaning or story connected to something. And that will have a big impact on our own expectations and whether we're meeting those expectations or not. Or yeah, it has an impact on how we're experiencing it.
Absolutely. I always get very curious about that as well. And one conversation I like to have with clients right away when we're talking about body image is just, again, some of that education that they have not received. Like when it comes to the science and research behind body image, there are 10 components that impact someone's relationship with their body, that where we can, put people in categories of having a good relationship with their body versus a poor or stressful relationship with their body. And of those 10 components, not one of them is what people's bodies look like.
Yeah.
And so, and I always use this idea. And, I had a twin sister. I have a twin sister, and her relationship with her body was way different. And we're twins. We have the same body. And so when we are just logically thinking about, well, why does one person have a good relationship with their body versus another? why can one have such a poor relationship with their body when another person who is the same size, shape has a wonderful relationship with it? That's because it truly is not dependent on what your body looks like.
Yeah.
And so breaking that apart and just giving some of the science and research behind what actually makes up body image, and then bringing their experience into it. Because I think, as you mentioned already, when you can bring your experience and really, really look at it and sit with, did when I was at this size, when I was manipulating in this way, was it actually better? Did it actually bring me what I wanted it to bring me? And then not to get too in the weeds here, but as well, when you're talking about that comparison and sitting with other people and being triggered in that way, or always creating these stories, I think that's why really, again, going to that body trust, when you have such a solid relationship of trust with yourself and what you know you want, and that being unwavering, it's very hard to be swayed by other people. And I think that's where you can, build a lot of resilience when it comes to being out in the world and having, like, being part of diet culture.
Yeah. So you mentioned body trust a number of times. So let's
Yeah.
dive into this a little more. So when you think
Right.
about body trust, what does that mean? But
Mhm.
also, if you're trying to help someone to build that, or if you were suggesting
Yeah.
ways for someone
Mhm.
to build their body trust, how should people be going about this? And I know I'm
That's
asking a huge question.
You're asking a huge question, but I like it. But I also just hope I don't confuse people. Yeah. So when I think of body trust, and I'm opening up my workbook here, because even when talking about, before I even dive into body trust with people, I talk about, oh yeah, see here, I'm looking at the table of contents in the workbook right now. Like, I go into body hate and body shame. And when I'm thinking of body trust, the reason I mention other things that come before that is because people have to be open to the idea that they can trust their body, which means they need to explore the idea of maybe letting go or sitting with body hate and body shame and starting to tolerate their body enough to open up the doors to allowing body respect and body trust to manifest and start to build in their life. So I introduce body trust and body respect together. And I think those are the doors that open up what everyone is actually looking for when they think about body image, which is starting to feel comfortable and confident and like my body, and be able to do X, Y, and Z in their life without fearing what people are going to think about what their body looks like or how they're going to feel in their body when they go out and do these things. And so ultimately, we want to get there. We want to help people get there, and it's going to look different for everyone, and everyone's journey and destination is going to look different. But in order to get there, and this is a lot of like the work that I've done through working with eating disorders, and that our practice does, and we dive into, is starting to build that idea of body respect and body trust. And what I view body trust as is getting to a place where we used to be before diet culture came in, before weight and size became good or bad or shameful, or we started hearing others' beliefs. And I view that as like a garden. It was when our garden was not there weren't like toxic things thrown in our garden or someone planting something in our garden that we didn't ask for. So it's our like clean slate prior to that. Because I believe, and I think everyone would agree, that we're born with body trust. We're not born with this duty in our life to have to manage and manipulate and food and our body and always be in control and have it take us away from life. So getting back to that place that, and sometimes people can't remember that place of body trust when they were a kid or young adult, where, they listened to their body. They didn't think much about it. They thought, what feels good? How much do I want to eat? What do I want to eat? How do I want to move? And they had to, they just didn't think about it much because they had that trust before they've been told good, bad, you can't trust these things. And so when you're able to get back to that place, it's so intuitive, it's so easy. And when I've found for myself and for clients that when bringing them to the place where they can trust where their body's supposed to be with their size, that their body is taking care of them, that they can trust food and having all types of food and being around all types of food in all different types of environments and eating on all different types of ways, not needing to eat in this routine way, but finding what feels good for them. When they get to that place, I love getting to that place with clients because then they're able to feel what they used to feel again, which is just feels so grounding and solid and intuitive that it's really, really hard then to believe anything different because it's coming from an intuitive, compassionate place. And you truly feel like I am in control. I don't need to be in control. I don't want to be in control. I have an awareness and acceptance and did all the deep work to really understand and believe that I trust my body. I trust food. I trust me around food. I trust me around movement. And it's just like an unwavering place, which I love getting people to. So anyways, does that answer?
That answers the question. And look, the thing that I take most from what you said there is that
Yeah.
body trust is a verb. I think
Yes.
what can often happen is it feels like if I do enough journaling, I'm going to get to this place of body trust. Or if I have this insight from listening to this podcast between the two of us, then I'm going to have this feeling of body trust. And actually, body trust is a lot more of I did lots of things and I did it over a period of time. And I realized that I can now trust my body
Yeah.
through
It is
having these
absolutely
different
practice.
experiences. So
Yes.
yeah, it was scary going to the pool the first time. And then I did it 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. And yeah, there
Yeah.
can still be some anticipation anxiety, but I know I can get through that. And the
Yeah.
same with going to this place to eat food or going on this holiday or doing this activity. I did it again and again. And by doing that, I showed myself that I can do these things it's not how my eating disorder or my unhelpful thoughts are leading me to believe it's gone very differently.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really glad you named that. It's so I was describing a place you can be, but to get there, yes, it takes a lot of practices to build up that body trust. You do have to build that back up. You do have to practice taking away these things that are built on distrust and disrespect, and then bring in the new things, which is foods, and bringing different foods back in. And as you mentioned, different body image exposures, getting to the beach and or wearing whatever, or having that experience with your body that might be more vulnerable. And you have to do these things over and over and over again and build those experiences. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's tough work, but really wonderful work.
Yeah. I also think it can be useful to have certain conversations where there are these aha moments where people frame things differently or see things in a different way. Because I think one of the things that people get stuck with is that what are people going to think? Well, like, and how would I deal with the fact that someone made a comment or someone didn't like what I was wearing or had something that was not very nice to say or nice to think or something along those lines. And this feeling of I would never be able to tolerate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the examples that I will often use is that I want you to reflect on your life and I want you to think of, are there certain areas in your life that you couldn't care less if someone thought differently than you do? So if I said, what is your favorite band or what is your favorite film or where is your favorite place to go on holiday, that if someone said, oh, I really dislike that music, you're not going to stop listening to that
Right.
band. You're going to feel like, well, that's great. You can not like that thing. I feel really confident in this. And so there are already many places in your life where you are okay with people feeling differently than you do, and that you're not having to get every person in the world to love your favorite band before it's okay for you to listen to it.
Yeah.
And I know this can sound a little trivial, but I think it's really important to recognize
Yeah.
that, hey, I'm already able to do this in many other realms. And the reason I'm not able to do this here isn't because I have to change the world. It's because I just
Yeah.
need to change how I think about this thing.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
I think about this thing differently and feel differently, it doesn't really matter what the rest of the world is thinking about this.
Right. Absolutely. I don't think it's trivial at all. I think it's a really good question to ask and get curious about. Like, yeah, why do I not care if someone calls me short, but I have such a reaction to if someone's commenting about their body or my body that it really tells you this is something I need to look at and explore my relationship with that myself. I think it really helps for people to like have that awareness. So I think that's a really good question to ask and get curious about. Absolutely.
Nice. And then in terms of, you talk about inner positivity. So what is
Mhm.
inner positivity?
Yes. Okay. So inner positivity, I think that comes along a little bit later in the work with people because I think that's so there's at the end, you're looking at the end of the program, which is positive acceptance, inner beauty, and body compassion. And I think those are hard concepts for people to not wrap their head around. I think that that's something that where they want to, what they want, where they want to go. Opening up them the idea that that is somewhere where they can go is hard to do when they haven't been in a place of respect and trust. So when I talk about inner positivity, self-compassion, like I'll just speak to that action. That is actually one of the 10 components that has been researched that impact people's relationship with their body. And so, how really what it says, how positive people are about themselves and in life versus, people who tend to be a little bit more negative about themselves, about life. That is one of the components that impact people's relationship with their body. Without going to that specific page and speaking to that inner positivity, just how you are navigating life, your relationship with yourself from a place of being more positive, hopeful, seeing things like the glass is half full rather than half empty. Those things impact your relationship with your body, and having that view of yourself too, of I am more than, like, what makes me me is my body, but also my qualities and my strengths and my quirks, and impacts your is in part of inner positivity is part of that positive acceptance, that then also impacts your relationship with your body as one of the components of
Yeah.
body image.
And that makes complete sense because
Mhm.
really how you're viewing yourself and your life has an impact on body image.
Mhm.
It's so
Mhm.
common that when someone has body image struggles, it's not that everything else in their life is going really, really well and they just have body image
Mhm.
struggles. Because even if on paper everything in their life appears to be going very well, if I was to ask them about that, it wouldn't be how they would think about it. From their perspective, their
Right.
relationship's not as great as it should be. Or, okay, I've got this
Mhm.
job that everyone thinks is a great job, but I feel like I'm the imposter there. I don't think I'm good enough. I feel like I'm falling behind, etc. And so
Mhm. Yeah.
what I would typically notice when someone's struggling with body image, it's really a reflection of how they're thinking about so many other components of their
Yep.
life. And it, in a lot of ways, mirrors that. As life gets
Yeah.
quote unquote worse, body image gets quote unquote worse.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
as life
Yeah.
improves, body image isn't quite as much a struggle as it was, because
Mhm.
what often happens is how someone feels about their body is just a proxy for how they're feeling about their life.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and they're coping. And I would say that really mirrors my journey with my relationship with food and body is, how life was going and how I was looking at life and the different hardships I was going through, the different traumas I was going through. And that makes all the sense. And I think that with that inner positivity, something that I think is so, are you showing yourself compassion or are you shaming yourself? Because I think it makes all the difference and it's so important. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around self-compassion, almost it being like self-indulgent or like letting yourself off the hook, when self-compassion is understanding that we all suffer and we all this is shared in life, and how we take care of ourselves around the suffering and can be our own cheerleader, which means taking care of ourselves. It doesn't mean just, yeah, it means coming from a place of how can I be a friend to myself. And again, going into the weeds, but that was a huge part of my journey. And I've listened to a few different podcasts, and I do not know this individual, but they were talking about how disordered eating and eating disorders they believe is a disorder of shame and just in a disorder of lack of self-compassion. And I have seen with my work with clients and why it's such a huge part of my program and workbook as well. Self-compassion, I think, is integral. It's such an important part when you're going through the whole process, when you're going through the struggles of, I'm trying to stop binging and I just had a binge. How are we reacting to that? And what is your tendency? Are you then shaming that? Are you getting curious and taking care of yourself because you just had a hard moment? How are you responding to that? And I think that really, I see a lot of my folks who are really struggle with being kind to themselves. And I think it really reinforces that cycle and keeps them stuck in the disordered eating and in the body shame and in having negative body image.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the first session when working with people, I bring in self-compassion, or at least after the first session, there is a exercise that I do connected to self-compassion so that we can have a conversation around it, because it is so integral. Like, self-compassion is hugely important for everyone. But if you're going through recovery, you are going to be coming up against stuff. And how you react to that, how you speak to yourself, how you care for yourself is going to have a really big impact on what happens. And I also agree with you. I think there's a lot of myths around what self-compassion means. And there's a big difference between self-criticism and people I think there's this feeling that if I'm not critical of myself, I'm never going to hold myself accountable. I'm never going to have any kind of self-awareness. I'm just going to bumble through life and just make a mess everywhere and just not care about it. It almost feels like this slight narcissist is how we think about what self-compassion is. I'm really disagreeing with that. You can have very, very high self-awareness of, hey, I really messed up in that conversation I just had with my friend. I can't believe that I said that. That didn't go the way that I would like it to go. And I'm going to make amends to this. That's self-compassion. We don't then have to be telling ourselves that we're worthless or we're such a fill in the blank. You can be, my God, I wish I'd done that differently. And I'm going to hold myself accountable and I'm going to make amends and deal with it. You don't have to bring in self-criticism. And so I think being aware of that, because I think it feels like there's these two alternatives that people have in their mind, where actually neither of those are really what self-compassion is about.
That shame, compassion, hold them more accountable and almost is more productive, when in reality, it is absolutely less productive and less helpful. I mean, even when you think of your relation, like an intimate relationship with someone, if there is someone who is feeling a lot of shame, they are going to have a hard time looking at that and then make the changes that might be necessary, that they might need to look at, versus someone who has compassion, understands, hey, I'm human, I'm going to make mistakes, can look at that from that place, do the necessary self-awareness and make those changes that again come from an intuitive, grounded place. I think shame is just so destructive, and I think there's just a ton of. I'm trying to find, as you were chatting, I'm trying to find the 5 top misconceptions around self-compassion, but because I thought that might be helpful to bring up. But I'm sure we can. People probably know what we're talking about, but and we kind of hit on it. So
no, for sure. And look, I think sometimes the argument is, well, self-criticism has been really successful and it has propelled me to be able to get along in life and to get this job or to get this thing. And it's not that it hasn't helped you to get there. Is that the best way to do it? And how has your experience been when doing it in that manner? Because you can have two people who are just as successful. One has done it with being very kind and self-compassionate to themselves, and the other has done it through self-criticism. And I know which one I
Yeah.
want to pick. I know which has been a
Yeah.
more
Yeah. I know
enjoyable
the
experience
journey that
going
feels
through it. I
better.
know who's in
Uh-huh.
a better, happier, more enjoyable place right now.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it's not that it can't get you there. It's just, is this the tool you really want to be using?
Right. Absolutely. Like what journey feels better? What journey do you want to be part of? And I think that that is the whole idea of when you're asking, well, does self-criticism actually work? Does it work in a way that aligns with you? And does it work in the long run? Very similar to diets. Okay, it's working, it's quote unquote working temporarily, but what else is it bringing to your life that is going to cause you distress, or where are you ultimately going to be when you get there? So I think it's very limiting. Yeah, I very much agree with you.
Yeah. And then in terms of body attunement, I know this is another piece that you talk
Mhm.
about connected to body image. So yeah, talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so body attunement, the ability to be attuned to your body's needs, wants, desires, feelings, and that gets super clouded and really hard to be able to do when you have all these external rules and you have all this distrust around food and you're following external advice. So being attuned to your body is, essentially a huge component of an intuitive eating and body trust. And that is, being able to, I guess, uncloud and really assess how these external rules, diets, advice, so that you can come back to yourself and learn how to reconnect with your body without all that noise, or maybe that noise is still there, but you're working to instead not listen to that noise and listen to your body, and understand what your cues are. So many people are so disconnected from their cues or how they even feel in their body. This goes beyond hunger and fullness cues. It also comes down to your attunement with how emotions feel in your body and how you exist in your body and how you sit within your body. And so attunement I think is huge, where day to day, hour to hour, you are checking in with your body, and that is informing you about how to take care of it, and how building off of those experiences also teaches you what maybe routines and consistencies and regularity and structure that you do want to put in, that comes from a place of attunement as well. So that's how I would describe attunement. That's how I work with attunement. It's a nice place to be.
Okay. No, and with the attunement piece, is a lot of this around, if I'm thinking about from an emotion standpoint. So attunement can
Mm-hmm.
be just being able to recognize and label what that emotion is.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
before I could maybe label three emotions, but now by spending more time becoming aware of these things, there's a lot more emotions that I can recognize. Because if I'm able to recognize different emotions, I'm able to recognize what could be the solution to that different
Mm-hmm.
emotion. Because if
Mm-hmm.
what I'm feeling
Yeah.
is loneliness, okay, I need more social connection. But if I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, I may need something different to this. Or if I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
jealousy, okay, I can deal with this in a different way. And giving you more of a gateway to start to explore these things, as opposed to anything that comes up that's negative, I have to use the blunt instrument of restriction or exercise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think you named that very well. It's getting the ability to get very curious and with what's coming up as far as your emotions, I would say even your thoughts. I mean, I think a lot when it comes to so when working with attunement, like there's a few things that pop up that I think are important. And one of those things is like just self-care and a self-care assessment. Do you know what it feels like beyond feeling uncomfortable? Do you know what emotions are coming up behind that? And then in turn, do you know how to take care of that emotion apart from using your disordered eating behaviors, or apart from shaming yourself or hopping on and off the scale? learning about like what do I need and what feels good for me around all these specific emotions. And I think being in tune not only with your emotions, but around, as I mentioned, hunger and fullness, but also movement, what feels good for my body. Like, does my body feel good moving in this way? Does it feel good moving at all today? What am I actually experiencing in my body if I were to stop, I guess, avoiding it or coping in these unhelpful ways? So I think attunement it comes in there's a variety of ways to explore it that are helpful to explore it. Like even when I just think of like binge eating, it's like I really, right off the bat, really like clients to get really in tune to not only how they're feeling during the binge, but how they're feeling after, what they're saying to themselves, how shame might be playing a role in that, what might be the trigger to binge, what feelings they may be having underneath that they can take care of themselves in other ways. So yeah, I think attunement is just another form of like building body trust, getting to know yourself as well. So yeah, another large topic.
Sure, sure. And just in terms of that last piece there, in terms of, okay, we've had a binge. What's going on afterwards? How am I speaking to
Mhm,
myself? What was the chain
mhm.
of events leading up to this? So what was happening an hour before? What was happening a couple of hours before? What's been happening yesterday, this whole week? Starting
Uh-huh,
to
uh-huh.
understand this, and very much from a let's get curious. Like, okay, so this thing
Yeah.
happened. Let's explore
Curiosity.
this. So removing the judgment piece with
Yes.
it and coming to, okay, so this thing happened, like let's explore
Mhm,
how this occurred, and
mhm.
again, not from a judgment place, but a, okay,
No.
let's look what happened. Oh, like maybe
Mhm,
this could be connected to where you are in your cycle,
mhm,
or I can see that you haven't slept so well for the last 3 days,
mhm,
or I can see that you
mhm.
were working overtime at your job. Like,
Right.
what are some of the things that could be an explanation for why this thing has occurred, so that we can start to figure out what needs to be happening so it doesn't occur again. And this is not to then demonize the binge. Like in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
it's often you needed that food to come in, and you needed that food to come in
Uh-huh.
for this event, and your body has got to a point that this was the only way that it was coming in, because I hadn't been, or you hadn't been recognizing the signs. And so,
Yeah.
cool, what could we be doing next time in advance of this happening so that your body's not requesting this food in this manner?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that so you're speaking very compassionately to yourself, right? That's really productive for you and how you're speaking right now versus if you were to be shaming, right? Shaming the binge, shaming yourself even before you get into the binge because you're having thoughts of binging and then shaming yourself throughout it and shaming yourself after, which totally shuts the door to building that, like having that mindful curiosity and having that awareness. And I think that that is so essential. That's like one of the things in the toolkit that we talk right off the bat before diving into things is building non-judgmental mindful curiosity, because it's so important to be able to even have the opportunity to look at what you're experiencing, you learn more about it, understand it more, and to then help bring you to the place where you want to go or solve what you want to solve. Or, yeah, absolutely. So, you just speaking compassionately is like a great example of when we're talking about the importance of self-compassion. It comes into like every piece of this. And I find I love working with binge eating. I think that one thing that I see that you are demonstrating and then that you're speaking to is when we start to challenge the binges, bringing on back in all food, normalize like regular eating patterns. What I find people get so stuck on is that shame, them saying it should look like this and judging their experience. Like, oh, well, I brought, I binged on donuts and I brought donuts in every day this week and I'm still binging, rather than getting curious and having that self-compassion for themselves. And it gets them stuck. So that's I think that's a huge part of working with binge eating is really understanding how deep that shame goes and bringing them to a place of self-compassion, because I think it really fuels the continued binge eating.
Yes, yes, definitely. Because the worse that you feel about it, the more of a big deal that you make it out to be,
Mhm.
the more compensating that is then made afterwards, the more that just then becomes a vicious
Mhm.
cycle. Look,
Yeah,
I'm not living in some la la land that I'm like, oh, it was really wonderful. You must have had the most enjoyable time when doing this. Like, yes, I understand that there are painful emotions connected to this, that there can be
oh
unhelpful
yeah.
thoughts that arise. And so
Mhm.
it's recognizing that those things are there and what are
Yeah,
ways that we can then truly support you so
right.
that this starts to become something that's happening less and less until it's something that's
Yeah.
not happening at all. And that, as
Mhm.
you said, once in the beginning, as people are bringing in more foods and they're bringing in more of that variety and more of that freedom, often there will be more binges to start with.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
this is
Mhm.
connected to the fact that this stuff has been off limits for so long, and now it's becoming available, and there is a much higher amount of novelty
Mhm.
connected to this.
Yeah.
There can be a lot more of feeling like I've crossed some invisible threshold of how much I was allowed,
Mhm.
and that then perpetuates a
Mhm.
binge taking off. And so there
Yeah.
are lots of reasons why, and I'm always a big one of managing expectations. Like this is
Oh yeah.
likely to occur
This
in the
is going to
beginning,
happen.
and this is
Yeah.
completely normal, and that's
Yep.
it's fine. And so yeah,
Mhm.
I think being able to talk about all of these different components is really helpful.
Absolutely. I think setting expectations is huge. And in body image work too, talking about body image work, like this is what the journey looks like. This is, we want to get really real on your intentions. Here are the different paths. Here's where we might visit. I think is really important for people to have, because it's very scary. So I think helping people manage expectations, but and also maybe having a little bit of framework and understanding can help them do the very scary thing. Because even when we're talking about binge eating, that's, I don't know if you hear my dog. It's a very scary thing to do. And a lot of times those fears are confirmed when you're like, see, I don't have control over this food. And so to, before even bringing that food in, setting that expectation of you're going to feel very out of control. We have to just keep going. And I think that's why support is really helpful. So people don't confirm that and then go back to the other ways that are unhelpful in how they're taking care of binge eating, which is, to just take that food out. So yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Well, because I also think like one, I want to validate someone's experience and what they went through, but two, I don't want to get connected to the eating disorder line of thinking, which I think can so often happen with someone seeing a therapist about something who isn't necessarily trained in body
Oh
image,
yeah.
and they're like, well, why maybe you shouldn't have had that third piece of pizza, or maybe you shouldn't have had
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
donuts, and it's then
Yeah.
colluding with the eating disorder thoughts. And so like yes, I want to validate that this was uncomfortable for you to go through, and this is what happens as part of the recovery journey, and you're not doing anything wrong, and this is all normal, and no, we don't need you to start restricting again and take all these foods out of the house, or all of that type of advice that is often given with good intentions, but it is misguided.
Mhm. It totally is. It's like, let's be an intuitive eater up until this point. Then we have a rule, then we have a limit.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that. And that's where I feel like people get stuck in the pseudo recovery, which is really something I am super passionate about. And why I talk about full trust is because I don't want you to need me, to need my programs, to need to continue to see me, need any kind of my rules that I put in place, because you have your own internal compass if you get to that full trust. So in talking about binge eating, this one person always comes to mind because they worked so hard and they had such a distrust with this specific food. It was donuts, and we had to keep, many people who don't know disordered eating disorder work or body image work would have been afraid themselves. We're like, oh yeah, you're like losing even more control. You're eating even more donuts. You're having even more binges. We've had X amount of donuts every single day for every single meal, and would have pulled away because they don't have trust that they're in that person's body, right? And in their capacity to get to a place where they can listen to their intuition and work through those things. So I think about, if we don't get to that, if I stopped with that client and we got to a place where this person kind of trusted donuts and had a better relationship, but didn't have another box, that's scary, but box after box for as many days as we needed to, they would have never been able to be like, oh my gosh, these are just donuts and I can take them or leave them and I'll have them when I want. And now I understand the pull to it. And because I went through that scary process. But when you're working with a provider who doesn't trust that themselves, it can be very confusing and it can get people kind of stuck in this. I have less rules, but I still have rules. And it still doesn't feel free. I was stuck in that state of recovery place for a long time. It still is very disheartening. So yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about
totally.
that.
And I feel the same way in regards to recovery with body image connected to weight and weight gain, where there's some point where someone's like, well, okay, maybe this is too much. And at that point, the provider is needing to be like, no, what you're doing is actually correct. Like your body knows what it is doing here. And it's not that we can't look at different things of what may be contributing, or is there something that we need to be taking into consideration. But I think what can often happen is there is just, oh, you've gone over some threshold. We need to start backpedaling and do something different. And that's just very unhelpful in terms of then filling someone with all of this feeling of distrust, and maybe I'm the one that this isn't going to work for, and see, this is what I thought from the beginning, and why did I get started with this? And that then becomes really, really unhelpful, versus someone being able to say like, no, what you were doing is actually the right thing, and that this is your body does know what it is doing here.
Right. It's the right thing. Your body's going to figure out, you're going to figure out. And of course, it's scary. And how can we take care of you around it? And how can we create a little bit more structure where we're dipping our toe in the water, not jumping straight in? And then you're like, I never want to get back in that water again. Like, creating that structure and safety at the same time, but continuing to keep moving forward. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that you talk about is body tolerance. And so, when you're thinking of body tolerance, what is this?
Yeah. So when I speak to body tolerance, it's just that. It's the ability to tolerate your body, to sit with those really distressing thoughts of around body image, around food, with your behaviors, and getting to a place where it's within your window of tolerance, where you can, continue to move forward and navigate it while having the ability to tolerate it, so you can move forward. Because if you don't have that body tolerance and we can't get to that place, it's really hard to make change. So this looks different for everyone, but body tolerance is often the place where people are starting, where I'm introducing maybe some ideas. They have come to me and they know what they're doing isn't working, but they also know and feel that I cannot tolerate my body. I hate my body. And so we have to work to get to a place where we work together to come up with a plan, or just understand, well, how can we maybe get to a place where we are just tolerating how we're feeling with our body and taking care of ourselves around that, while we're letting go of these behaviors and ideas that we know and and you've come to understand do not work for you, enough to have that window of tolerance to be able to explore new behaviors and new thoughts, beliefs, and education, where we're not getting hyper or hypo aroused, where we are then unable to do the work necessary to move forward. So body tolerances feel like, for almost every client, a place where we start needing to sit, whether, with their distressing body image thoughts and feelings within their body.
Okay. And so from a practical standpoint, if someone was saying, hey, I'm having a lot of body distress, I'm wanting some help to learn some body tolerance, what are some of the ways that you would go about that? And obviously it's collaborative, but if you were to say, okay, these are a couple of things that I would suggest or people could try, what would they be?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things like when I think of body tolerance, I think of this metaphor. I forgot where I heard this, but where if you are sitting with these really distressing thoughts and feelings around body image, and it's like this wall in the room, and usually what people are trying to do is because it's so distressing, they're staring at the wall and they're trying to push the wall away, and they're putting all their energy and effort into that wall. Where I try to describe it as, okay, that wall is in the room. We are going to look the other way, focus on other things. So taking focus off of that. So that is a lot of like distress tolerance. And it might be we're covering the mirrors in our house. We are getting, and this might be hard to do initially, but getting rid of the scale. We're going to, whenever we go to body check, which, with whether we are checking in the mirror, on the scale, in clothes, with our hands around our body, we are trying to lessen that. We're trying to lessen the distress, and then finding ways that are helpful for you to cope, whether that is a mantra that really is something you believe, not like, something outlandish that really they can't jive with, like my body is okay where it's at. A lot of people don't feel that way, but good is to take care of myself in this way, whatever it might be, whatever mantra sticks with them. So trying to decrease the amount of distress that comes up and use some other coping, whether that is like doing some breath work, noticing like the five senses, like five things around the room of a certain color, that practice. So there's a lot of therapeutic practices there, and some grounding techniques might be like lighting a candle. These are things that just to put your focus elsewhere, to calm your nervous system. Yeah, those are some things I would say. I could also go to that part of the workbook to see what I have there, but a lot of distress tolerance, and there's some distracting in there that's really helpful. And wouldn't say distraction is helpful in your journey, but at certain parts, like in the body tolerance phase, it is helpful to do a bit of distraction as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Do you use acceptance and commitment therapy? Is that something that's part of your practice or the way that you work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Because when I'm hearing you talk about that, there's a lot of things from acceptance and commitment therapy that would be really helpful in those moments, whether that is using something like the various different diffusion techniques in terms of dealing with the unhelpful thoughts that are coming up, or using something like dropping the anchor, which is, as you talked about, coming back into that present moment, so that you are noticing things around the room, you are noticing your breath, you are noticing things that you can smell, you're coming back into this present moment. And I think one of the things that I would add with this, and I think actually the metaphor around the pushing of the wall is probably a good one, is that a lot of the distress is actually around the resistance piece.
Yeah.
It's the, why is this thing happening to me? Am I going to be able to tolerate this? What happens if this is still here in 15 minutes? This just feels too much. And it's all of the stuff that is added on top of the experience that someone is going through. And so when someone says, "Oh, it was really uncomfortable," so okay, tell me. Let's talk about the thing that was uncomfortable. Can we focus on that actual sensation within the body? But what often happens is, like, there is that initial sensation, and then there is all of this suffering that is layered on top of that. And so a lot of what acceptance and commitment therapy is about is like, how do we stay with the actual present discomfort and not get all hooked up in all of the thoughts and the struggle and the suffering that is layered on top of that. And yes, that is a practice, and there are different techniques for doing that. But I think that if I'm thinking about how does someone genuinely build up that tolerance, that is one of the ways.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in addition to acceptance and commitment therapy, what I find very helpful is internal family systems work. Part of that, like body tolerance phase and work that I do with clients, I think right before it or right after, we talk about body shame and body hate. And that's where we bring in the introduction of parts work. And so this without giving too much explanation, I'm sure you're aware of what parts work
I
is, that
am,
we
but I
all,
haven't talked about it very much
oh, it's,
on the podcast, and I don't
oh,
actually
it's
use
so
internal
wonderful.
family systems
Oh,
myself. I it's something I'm aware of. I think
it's,
Dick Schwartzer is fantastic. There's an
mhm. Yes,
incredible podcast. I'm not the biggest Tim Ferriss fan. I like some parts of
yeah,
Tim Ferriss and not
yeah,
other parts of Tim Ferriss.
right,
But there's a
right.
really great interview that he did with Dick
Mm,
Schwartz, who invented internal family system, where Tim actually
yeah,
has a session with him.
yeah,
And I think it's
yeah,
probably one of the best demonstrations of what it is, what it can look like, how it works.
yeah.
And so I will
Mhm.
put that in the show notes, and I highly recommend that
Yes,
people check that out.
it is
But yeah,
so amazing. It's
spend
so
a couple of
amazing.
minutes talking about
Yeah,
what it
I'm going to
is.
explain it a little just because when I feel like this is so important when you're talking about body tolerance, that if people are like, "Oh man, I'm having a really hard time tolerating my body." A lot of times I think it's because it when we have a really hard time not looking at that wall and trying to push it because it's just huge wall that is very much impacting us that we really want away.
Yeah,
And so when I think of like body shame and body hate being that wall, so we're trying to tolerate our body, but we have this part of us that is really hates our body and feels a lot of shame, and that brings us a lot of discomfort. So when it comes to parts work, and I had Kelly Ulmer, she's a therapist. She does an interview in my program, and she talks a lot about the role of body shame in parts work. She's an IFS therapist. We're actually all getting trained at Side by Side in IFS so we can use it. It's amazing. It's so helpful because what we need to be able to sit with that. But so parts work, it's this idea that so this philosophy that you have lots of different parts of yourself. You have your self part that you are born with. It's the curious, compassionate, creative, courageous, curious, compassionate part of yourself. And then there's these other parts that pop up to protect your system, and they all work together. And the parts that pop up throughout your life and your experiences are firefighters and managers. And those are, binging and restriction and shaming your body and hopping on the scale, controlling food, purging, exercise, all of that. And it comes up to protect these exiled parts, which are those parts that are really hard to look at that we work on in therapy. Thoughts of, I am not good enough. I like those thoughts and feelings of shame and guilt and abandonment that we push away, that these firefighters, managers take care of. And a lot of times we get stuck in these firefighters and manager parts, and we need to get back to our self part. Now, the idea behind a really important piece of this is that there are no bad parts. There are no bad parts of us. They're all trying to help and serve us. So when we look at body hate and body shame, this is a part of us that really needs to be heard and understood. And it is not going to give up without a fight because it has reasons to be there, to protect us from these exiled parts. So we really want to get curious about it. So another way I would say with body tolerance that I have found helpful, and I found it helpful in a lot of my life, is by letting that part exist and get curious about it. And a lot of times that allows it to step aside. So if we were sitting in a lot of body hate and we wanted to get to more body tolerance, we can, and I'm doing this a super watered down version explanation, but we can get curious and say, what are you trying to tell me when you're saying, hey, don't forget you hate your body? We need to change it. This is so shameful. When I don't want to look at you for a second and let you speak and lead, what are you trying to tell me? And by getting curious and opening up to it to let it like speak to you and maybe say, hey, I'm protecting you from feeling those feelings of abandonment or feeling not good enough or feeling like you can't get those things in your life you might want to get, whatever it's telling you, we can then have a conversation back and forth and all be on the same side and look at it compassionately and even like communicate back with it and say, I hear you. I see you. You're an important part. You're not going anywhere. You can pop up at any point in this process to come back and remind me of these important things. But right now, what do you need to be able to step aside so we can let the self part guide us and maybe be a little bit more curious about what it might be like to tolerate our body and open ourselves up to new ideas of body respect and body trust. And I think that allows for that part, that is an important part that we can't push away, that we don't want to get rid of. We just don't want it to be leading. It allows it to sit there in the room and for us to feel like it's heard and understood. And so, yeah, there's a lot to that, but I find that idea so helpful for clients because they feel a strong pull to that body hate. And of course they do. It's trying to serve a purpose. So we want to let them know it's going to be there. We can get curious while we explore these other parts of ourselves too. And it can happen at any point.
And because I think what often happens, it's either you get sucked in with the body hate, and so you then believe I need to do all of these things,
Right.
or you then get judgmental of yourself for the fact that I do have this body hate, and why can't I just appreciate this body I have and this life I have? And then there's all of that. To like whatever way you cut it, it feels like you're doing the wrong thing. And so yeah, I like that idea. And I often talk about this connected to eating disorder thoughts. Because people can get so angry about like, why am I still having these thoughts?
Right.
Why are these coming up? And my response is always like, they're trying to keep you safe. Like this is something that you've done for a really long time. And so your brain is saying, hey, remember we do this thing. This keeps you safe. And even if it doesn't actually keep you safe, that's at least the way that is interpreted from your brain. And so like some small child who is really demanding and saying, hey, I need this from you. It's not that you then start shouting at the child and say, no, you don't. You can comfort the child and also say, well, we need to do this, or we're going to do this a different way.
Yes.
And I think the way that people frame things and you imagine things really, really has a lot of power, or can add a lot of power to it. And there's a really lovely example of just how much words can impact on the way that we think about it. They did this experiment with, I think it's German speakers and Spanish speakers, and they took words in those languages where in one language they would be feminine and in other languages they would be masculine, and then asked them to describe that object. And so one of the objects they used was a bridge. And so in one dialect it's masculine, in one it is feminine. And the way that they described it matched up to the masculine and feminine. So it would be sleek, or it would be beautiful, or it would be gorgeous, or it would be strong, and it would be solid. This has a really big impact. Like all of these little things have a really big impact on us. And so if we imagine that part of ourselves in one way versus another way, will have an impact on how we relate to that part, or how big and powerful we think of that part as being versus how tender that part could be.
Absolutely. Language, I feel it's so important. And we spoke to that multiple times within this time together, as far as how are you speaking to yourself when it comes to the binge? How are you speaking yourself when it comes to the eating disorder? And you named that. I think that it's really unhelpful to actually name the eating disorder part as something that you don't like, and shaming that eating disorder part, because it's part of the team. We have to get to know it. We have to understand it. We have to make sure the role that it serves, it understands it could let go of that role, because we have something else we can now use that's going to be much better for our whole system. And it could stop doing the heavy lifting, that part can stop doing the heavy lifting. So we're all on the same team. And I think of a lot of, there's the eating, and that is, understanding that like we're in the water and we don't know how to swim. We have to grab onto that raft, and that raft is the eating disorder. Like that is okay. What we can do is maybe let go of it for a second, like that raft or log, swim a little on our own and come back to it. Then maybe swim a little bit more and then come back to it until we learn how to swim without that. And I think like that's how I like to view it, is we're all working together. There's a reason we have this log, or we've created this raft and this part of us. And, we can show it kindness and understanding while we're working to swim on our own, or have that self part guide us. And I think that is a very important framework. And there's a lot of research behind it too, speaking to internal family systems, and in that way, there being no bad parts, rather than externalizing the eating disorder as this demonizing it. It has negative effects and impacts on people's recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it also can get in the way of someone understanding, why is this thing still going on?
Mhm.
The take on this is doing absolutely nothing for my life. It is serving absolutely no purpose. I'm going to disagree with that. There
Yeah.
could be a way better way of getting all of these
Mhm.
things, but it is doing something for you.
Right.
It is
Yeah.
giving you a sense of control. It is
Yeah.
giving you a way of avoiding something that is uncomfortable. And even if these things don't feel like they're conscious, underneath it is doing something for you. And that
Right.
can be
Yeah.
because of the state that you're in, the fact that you are in this eating disorder state because of being malnourished, because there hasn't been enough energy coming in. Like that could be the thing that is underneath all this, driving why this is occurring. But in that state, this thing is doing something for you. And we
Yeah.
can figure out what that is. We can explore that. And at the same time, recognize there are other ways to be able to deal with this.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It is a resilient way of surviving. And it's absolutely, when I think of the development of eating disorders in certain situations, in certain environments, like that is whether it's an eating disorder or another form of coping, whether that's, becoming very avoidant, all of those things are very resilient things that people pick up when they don't have the tools or means to take care of themselves in another way. And I think then they just hang on, people hang on to those patterns. And so it's important to understand how that developed, and yeah, like you said, find a better way when that is available, because I also want to honor and recognize that some people are still in those situations and still in those places where it's harder to let go of that than it might be for some folks who are no longer in that same situation, where they have built up that resilience through coping with an eating disorder as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the
Mhm.
other pieces that you talk about in part of the book is having positive peers. And so what does
Oh, yeah.
this look like in reality?
Yeah, I mean, your environment, of course, really shapes your relationship with food and body and your thoughts and beliefs. And so, with relationship to peers, we actually have, I forgot exactly what they spoke to, but in that section, we have another therapist who talks about boundaries, which I think isn't. Whenever you bring something up, Chris, I'm like, well, there's like a million things to go into here. But
Sure.
when it comes to relationship with peers, like I think a couple of tangible tools that people can like look at and start working on is in your relationships, from your inner circle to your outer circle, how are they impacting your relationship with food and body? And how can we start to take care of that and change that? Whether that is, one of the things that we do right away, like to do right away for body image with our clients, is like we start cleaning up their social media, because you are getting constant reminders or like these messages about good bodies versus bad bodies. You only have maybe one type of body in your feed, a lot of diet culture in your feed. And so when you start to expand and like just rewire and let your mind see all of these other bodies, all these other ways of doing things, all these other beliefs, it's extremely helpful. It can be very hard though for folks to start doing that as well. But from like social media and what you're bringing in those relationships to your close relationships are really going to impact your relationship to your body. So whether that is maybe needing to take a break from a relationship, cut out a relationship from your life, or create boundaries in that relationship and understand what those boundaries may be, that's important. And that's, again, one of the 10 components when it comes to relationship with your body. People with relationships with others who have good relationships to their body, that very much impacts their relationship with their body image. So it's just, yeah, very real and impactful thing when it comes to body image, is relationships. So small and large, close and not so close, they all have an impact, from social media to like the people you're living with. So I think it's really important to understand, how is this impacting my behaviors, when I'm around this person, when I'm having this social media relationship with this person, how is that impacting my behaviors and my beliefs? So we like to do a little bit of cleanup and raise some awareness and make some boundaries around that.
Yeah. Definitely. The quote that comes to mind, and I think this was talked about in a different context, but you are the average of the five people you spend the most time with, or something to
Mhm,
that accord. And so, yeah, if you're
mhm,
spending a lot of time with people where body image is, or living in a certain body shape or size, or dieting is really important, like that's gonna rub off on
mhm.
you, and that's gonna
Yeah,
have an
absolutely.
impact. And yeah, we can all be our own selves, and we can care about the things that we want to care about. But if that is then a huge focus of those people's lives, and it's coming up a lot in their conversations, it's coming up a lot in their values, in their judgments, all of those things,
Mhm,
then yeah, it's gonna be harder to be around those people. And so yes, you can have
mhm,
boundaries and just say, hey, when we're hanging out together, I don't want to talk about this. And you may find that
mhm,
you can
mhm,
genuinely do that, and that there are ways that you can be with that person where you have other overlapping interests and hobbies that
mhm.
have nothing to do with the dieting piece, or have nothing to do with the body aesthetic changing piece that they're into. And that can still continue on, and you have a great relationship there. And then there'll be
Yeah.
other times where the recognition is it's just not going to work.
Right,
And
right.
yeah,
Yeah, you have the power and control over establishing and naming those boundaries, and that the rest is up to them whether they're going to respect that. That is not in your court, and you can then decide, okay, based on how they're responding to me expressing my boundaries, how now do I want to take care of myself and want to like what do I want in this relationship moving forward to, as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a permanent thing, or doesn't necessarily have to be a
Mhm,
permanent thing. I definitely find that for many clients in the beginning, someone talking about their diet or this new exercise thing that they've started, or the fact that I lose weight, is just so triggering and so
mhm,
harmful for them. It sends them into a spiral. It causes so much distress to hear that. And then fast forward 6 months' time, a year's time, however long, they're able to hear that, and it just doesn't have an impact in the same way. The response to hearing that isn't, it's so unfair, I'm missing out on the opportunity to do
mhm,
this. Why does everyone else get to do this and I don't? Now becomes, my
mhm.
God, I'm so thankful that is not me. Like I'm
Yeah.
so
Oh,
happy
yeah.
this is not how I'm now spending my life. And so
Yeah.
it may be that, yeah, at some point in the future, you're just able to tolerate a lot more of those comments, and it just
Mhm,
doesn't bother you in the way that it used to. And so, yeah, that relationship now does start to work for you.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And how cool is it to, I love when people come to that place and they're just like, wow, I have so much trust and understanding around my relationship with food and body that I can just sit with it. And actually, I can have a conversation and maybe plant some positive seeds. But
Yes.
when you're taking care of yourself, you absolutely need to put yourself first and put a pause. And if it's, if it's triggering and going to cause you to go backwards or just be distressed. So yeah, those absolutely can change and you can absolutely bring those back into your life. Just might want to assess having a little bit of a pause
Yeah.
in those.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, Jamie, we have covered a ton as part of this conversation. What is there anything I haven't asked you that you wanted me to ask you, or are there anything that you want to add? I'll get to website and social media and all that in a moment, but in terms of
Yeah, no,
just the topic of body image, is there anything we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I think if I could say one last thing that I really would want people to get out of this is regardless of how stuck and confused you feel when it comes to body image or how uncomfortable it feels, having a better relationship with your body is absolutely possible. I would not be doing this work if I did not feel like people can get there. And so I would say just keep going. Like, don't give up. Keep looking for additional resources. Don't give up on yourself because you can truly transform relationship with body image and get the support you need in order to really feel free and comfortable. And then in turn, that impacts all aspects of your life and your relationship and your opportunities and the way you can bring more of your values into your life. So just should, I guess, if you ever are feeling hopeless in that, you can do to get to a better relationship with your body
Yeah,
and body
and
image.
we are definitely on the same page with that. I totally agree with you. So yeah, where can
Mhm.
people go if they want to find out more about you?
Jamie RD _ on Instagram, Jamie the dietitian. I believe is the website. Yes, it is jamiethedietitian.com. The work I like to do with clients now, as I mentioned a few times, is the program I have that helps people to work on all those aspects when it comes to their relationship with food and body, to leave no stone unturned and to really dive into all of the things we talked about, plus more that I've been developing for years, so that people can, yeah, get to that finish line and not be stuck in pseudo recovery. So, and in addition, there's the journal. People can find my journal. It's kind of hard to find. So if you go to the website first, and then it will bring them to the journal on Amazon. It's a 500-page journal. It goes along with my course, and it really just it helps people navigate this at like a kind of self-paced, explore the different concepts. So yeah, those are a few places.
Okay, cool. Well, look, I will put all of those links in the show notes, and thank you so
Okay,
much
perfect.
for doing this and for being so gracious with all of this time. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, this was very fun to into. So thanks for having me, Chris.
Awesome. So that was my conversation with Jamie. If you liked what we covered as part of this episode, then I would highly suggest or recommend that you get her book. It's called Food and Body Image Freedom Workbook and Journal. It's available on Amazon. It's probably available lots of other places, but that was where I was able to find it. And so, yeah, if you benefit from this conversation and you liked a lot of the areas that we touched on, then this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what is covered in that book. So that is it for this week's episode. As I mentioned at the top, I'm currently taking on new clients. If you're wanting to fully recover and you're wanting the support and the help and the guidance to make that a reality, I would love to help. You can send an email to info@7-health.com and put coaching in the subject line, and I can get the details over to you. So that's it for this week. Have a wonderful week. I'll catch you again soon. Take care.